inside the all-new House of Public Discourse Radio.com. The house is an area in social media where individuals can come together to discuss societal issues, and from that discussion influence political action. Welcome to the house,
where our house is your house.
Good day, everyone. This is Johnny. Welcome to Progressive Talk Zone, streaming from the Motown Get Down, live to your Facebook page from the House of Public Discourse Forum via the all-new House of Public Discourse Radio.com. Okay, what we want to talk about today is Growing Up Rosewood, the book. And we're going to talk about the economy of Goldsboro and all the aspects that I have found writing my book and researching this book. The economy, we've already talked about the people and chapter 1. And chapter 2, we're gonna talk about the economy. And once again, I'm really stepping out on a limb here when you start talking a lot of figures and stats with the attention span of the reader being that of a goldfish these days. So there is some, I may not use these chapters. I may. It depends on what kind of input I get from Herb, my publisher, Mr. Herb New. So thankful for Herb and his guidance already, and we're just getting started. So without further ado, what we'll do, we'll dive right into this thing. And we're talking about today Growing Up Rosewood. Rosewood is a small farming community in Wayne County, Eastern North Carolina region. The major city in the county is Goldsboro. And what we're going to discuss on today's program, the reason I wanted to put this chapter in, the Wayne County economy, is because I think the economy of the region in a lot of ways shapes how that area functions. And a lot of the things that and beliefs and political persuasions and traditional values and whatever come into play. But I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be straight up with you. First of all, I think there's this misconception that Johnny's here trashing Rosewood, Goldsboro, Wayne County. That is not my intention. But I'll be honest with you, somebody needs to say something because you guys are lagging way, not just behind, okay, Goldsboro, Wayne County. You're not just behind the curve. You can't even see the curve. And it gives me no pleasure to say that. And I'm going to give you some empirical data. And when I say empirical data, I don't mean something that I pulled off some fly-by-night website. This is an impact study done by the Pew Research Center that is backed up by the Labor of Statistics for the region. Goldsboro's poverty and shrinking middle class was caused by a sluggish local economy and low wages. Employment in the county has remained flat the past 2 decades, despite an increase in population. For all jobs, public and private, 42,115 people worked on average in Goldsboro, Wayne County in 1996. I've got to have some coffee, so bear with me. According to our research, according to 2016 figures, the number of jobs added was 42,150. Over that period, the county lost 489 public sector jobs, all of which were state and federal positions, and gained 524 private sector jobs. The manufacturing sector, I should say, which lost 1,654 jobs statewide, has been the hard-hit one, as well as construction. Firms in the other services sector have shed hundreds of jobs in Goldsboro and Wayne County. Employment increases of 2,658 and 933 respectively were seen in the healthcare and social assistance sectors and in accommodation and food service sectors. Although there were still 725 jobs lost in nursing homes and long-term care facilities, there was a great deal of fluctuation in those numbers, according to our research. Wayne County is dominated by healthcare and social assistance services, retail trade, manufacturing, accommodations, and food services in that order. A smaller share of the county's employment is accounted for sectors based on advanced education or training, such as finance or professional services. But I want to put a stop right there. If you're a professional person and you're from Goldsboro and you go to school and you get your college education, your undergrad, and you are fortunate enough to go on to graduate school and become a professional person, your chances of you coming back to Goldsboro are just about slim to none. There are some that do, and they suffer from it. We talked about that last chapter. Even professionals make quite a bit less money in Goldsboro, Wayne County than their counterparts living in more urbanized areas of the state. The average annual pay for all private sector employment grew less rapidly in the county, 9.7% over 20 years, compared to 22.6% for the state. Though of course a great deal of variation exists between industries. Meaning, there's some, these numbers are on an average number. Some industries are up here, some are down here, but somewhere they meet right here. Wayne County's two largest occupational groups, office and administrative support and sales, account for more than 25% of total employment. 10% of the county's jobs are in production, but more likely are the slaughter of pigs and engines being made. Goldsboro, it's all about agriculture in Goldsboro. Just it's the base, it's Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, and the industries that have sprung up that cater and service those people that can hang on in Goldsboro, and anything agri-related. Transportation and production occupations comprise a larger portion of Wayne County's economy than in the entire state, while figures with higher knowledge content are less prevalent. As in smaller economies across America, Wayne County is just no different in employment conditions. Between 2000 and 2016, nearly half of all occupations in Goldsboro, Wayne County lost employment. Healthcare practitioners and technicians, food preparation and management experience saw the most growth. If you're in Goldsboro, Rosewood, the food service industry is a given. You're going to do well if you hold your cards, play your cards just right. You're going to be you can have a viable business. Transportation, of course, is on that list because Goldsboro has an aging community, and the mobility of the elderly is a major issue in America nowadays, and this is why these transportation type businesses have sprung up, among other among other reasons. The county's employment by occupation in 2016 was about the same as it was in 2000 due to a balance between growing and shrinking professions. In Goldsboro, the pig, chicken, turkey slaughter business has grown. The Schaefer Battery, Kemp Furniture, Borden, some of those other manufacturers and of goods has shrank. The median wage in the county is lower than the average in the state, and we've already alluded to that, for almost all occupational groups. And I want to restate that for Goldsboro. If you're living in Goldsboro and Wayne County, I don't care if you're digging a ditch or performing brain surgery. The median wage in the county is lower than the average in the state for almost all occupational groups. With a median wage of less than $30,000, the 5 most common occupational groups by employment account for 54% of all employment in the county. In small bore analysis of specific occupations, it is revealed that over 20,000 jobs are underpaying the living income standard for Wayne County. 32,981 for a family consisting of 1 adult, 1 child across all 4 occupational groups. All jobs pay less at the median of the 22 occupational groups. More than half pay less than the LIS median. However, there is good news. There is some good news. Despite many workers' wages being insufficient to ensure financial well-being, it is those occupations with similar training and functions, such as those with lower wages, that are among the most promising for employment growth. So you can get you a $7.25 an hour job in Goldsboro now. You sure can, and they'll be happy to pay you for it. Okay? Wage slavery in Goldsboro, Wayne County has always been a hallmark of the town. As the foundation of economic development, the key should be to build an existing growth that is centered on industries such as healthcare and technology. Furthermore, those in lower paying jobs can be positioned to move to higher paying jobs through training, for example. Little commentary here. One of the reasons you're not seeing businesses come to Goldsboro, North Carolina, and it'll be something that we cover later on in our book, is these employers do not want to come to an area where your school system is, your statewide school system is in the lower echelons of states. And within that lower echelons of states, Wayne County's public education system is damn near one of the worst in North Carolina, which puts them damn near one of the worst in the entire nation. Now, that's not a reflection of the teachers that teach school in Rosewood. There's a lot of factors involved with that. That creates that. And all of those, I'm sure, I wish I had a teacher to come on the show with me and go over some of those things, because I think that would make a great show. But despite the low wages for many workers, there is some good news coming out of Wayne County and Goldsboro. Many workers who are marginally engaged in the labor force participation rate in Goldsboro, which measures the number of workers working or actively seeking work, is really lower than state and county rates at this point. Despite having an employment to population ratio of 41%, Goldsboro is 15% less productive than the state at large. Blacks, whites, Hispanics differ substantially on both measures, as do the unemployment rates. I know this is dry stuff, but I hope it can paint a picture of the area in which I grew up in. Actually, the area was in much better shape in the early growings ups of my life when the Democrats, and you know, guys, I'm no Democrat. I used to be, but but the facts don't lie. When the Democratic Party was running the state, it wasn't damn near one of the worst states like it is now. Because even though there's a lot of progress in North Carolina, thank God for the Research Triangle Park, thank God for Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill. Fuck Jesse Helms and he has put a fence around him. If we'd have put a fence around the Triangle and the liberal areas of North Carolina like Jesse Helms suggested, then your asses would be more in a sling than you already are. Compared to Goldsboro, more people in North Carolina work full-time all year round. The indicators suggest that a significant portion of Goldsboro's adult population stops seeking jobs or work part-time or infrequently. There are tons, and I know this for a fact, there are tons and tons and tons of people that work in Goldsboro. I call it nomadic employment. They work temporary jobs. They get with a guy that needs something done, some kind of construction work done, cement layers, temporary construction jobs. There's a lot of that going on. Shortly put, poverty in Goldsboro is the result of a wider economic problem. An unstable economy and low wages in Goldsboro have altered the nature and conditions of work. It is no longer reliable for workers without any formal schooling to turn to factories, construction sites, or warehouses that, while they do not make you rich, keep you going. Now, I'll use Johnny for an example. I have an entrepreneurial spirit. I'm also, I just cannot stand dealing with authority. And I know that's not always a good thing, but I just wasn't a guy that really did well working a 9-to-5 job with a boss over your head and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, with people who do. Everybody's got a choice, but all I ever heard from my family was, you need to quit doing all this, being your own boss stuff. You're never going to get anywhere. You're always going to fail. You might as well go and get down there on the assembly line and start slinging that stuff on the assembly line, be like everybody else. Well, that advice just wasn't going to work for me. But it's, especially for workers without a high school diploma, that scenario changes quite expeditiously because, I feel I'm a halfway decent, smart guy. I think I have some value as a marketing person and business idea guy. And, I know that I probably would have lived a more, that's the best way to put it. I'd have probably lived a more everyday, everybody life if I would have just, subdued to authority and bucked it up and toughed it up and worked at Schaefer Battery on the assembly line, But that just wasn't in the cards for me. But recently, white-collar workers have been hurt by the decline of public sector jobs, as well as turmoil in the banking and accounting sectors. Additionally, Goldsboro's highest paying industries fall short of counterbalancing increasing economic adversity and the relativity, and it's relatively few in numbers. As we move on to the early days, we get into really the crux of growing up Rosewood. I grew up on a 2-lane road in Tobacco Road country in the Rosewood community. It's the eastern part of North Carolina. 1968 is the year. Yes, this year marked a turning point for many people. 7 was my age at the time. I was always a person, the news was always in my ears. Even when I was so young, in Miss Davis's second grade class, Miss Arlene Davis's second grade class, my favorite exercise was current event storytelling. I'd love to get up in front of the class and talk about what I heard Walter Cronkite say on the news. And this is second grade. I was in second grade. And so I think one reason I'm finally got my shit together and decided, what my best function as a human being to give back to my community and life is writing and political advocacy. It was kind of foretold a little bit for my love for telling of current events in my second grade class. And even as a small child, I could sense the tensions of the time. You got to remember, it's 1968, folks. All over the country, protests were raging. Vietnam, we were living in the Cold War era. Civil rights of the individual were front and center. And the explosion of all these things occurred in 1968. And it's why I decided to start my growing up Rosewood experience in 1968. A lot happened that year, and a lot of things happened within that year that shaped my viewpoints to this very day. Much like most kids my age, I was passionate about sports. January 1968, it's early in the year. While I wasn't aware at the time, I witnessed the basketball game of the century, along with my dad, my grandfather, and my uncle. UCLA plays Houston at the Astrodome, led by the future NBA star Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, in the first NCAA basketball game to be broadcast nationally in prime time. Houston ends up winning that game with Elvin Hayes leading the way and breaking, at the time, Lou Alcindor's UCLA winning streak. And they won in a very close game, 71-69. At the time, and it's been a tradition forever, political conservatism is a hallmark of Rosewood. Rosewood rests in the heart of the Bible Belt South. At that time, my favorite team was the North Carolina Tar Heels, and which featured Black player Charlie Scott. Dean Smith's example continues to inspire me today. My hero at the time, Charlie Scott, was the first African American to play varsity basketball in the ACC. At this point, now you got to remember something. I'm 7 years old here. At this point, I heard my grandfather barking incessantly. Neither one of them damn teams had a white man on them. In just about that tone of voice. The sound of racism is familiar to me, even at the age of 7. The situation created considerable confusion for me at the time in my life. As a child, I also remember adults making racial slurs around me when I was growing up in church. We learned about brotherly love every Sunday. In addition, I also recall the racist remarks of my gruff grandfather and my mother dearest, who agreed with him. Okay, I heard these things not just once, not twice. I heard them all the time. As a Hill House kid growing up in Rosewood, one could say we were opinionated. My family is a very opinionated family. In my childhood, I remember going to Pine Forest Methodist Church with my grandma and my grandpa, my dad, my mom, and we would go there, to the church and, light the candles. And my dad even did the morning service. My grandma sang in the choir. And I was asked to be the church acolyte by Pastor Mayo. And as I walked out of Pastor Mayo's chamber, my grandma, of course, was singing in the choir. She sat on my side facing the congregation just across from me. And Johnny, in other words, couldn't sleep because I had the whole damn congregation looking at me because I'm sitting up front and, behind the pastor, and everybody is looking at me. So I couldn't nod off, and I had to listen to what the pastor was saying and the things people were saying and how they acted to current events, and me personally have caught my attention already at this time in my life. I don't have a pinpoint reason why, but I always was cognitive of these racial comments that was counter to what I was being taught in my church. And I don't know, I can't speak for anybody else, but for Johnny, it was confusing. Okay, it confused the fuck out of me. An enormous amount of activity was taking place around the world and the country. According to North Korea, the U.S. Pueblo strayed into territorial waters. An American crewman is killed and 82 others are in prison. An 11-month standoff with the United States ensues. There was the Tet Offensive. It's launched by the communists in North Vietnam. By attacking the southern strongholds, the Johnson's administration contradicts its view that the South, backed by the United States, is winning the war. In other words, the Tet Offensive proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the hippies were on to something. Then there are the issues that have mattered to me, and I want to start over here. I'm going to drink a little bit of coffee before I start this. Then there are the issues that have mattered to me since I became friends with the likes of Perry Pee Wee Eason, who is no longer on this earth, who was the first brother that I walked around in school, with the old, me and Perry used to walk around like this. In school, buddies, arms around each other, fastest running. I tell you what, Pee Wee Eason, if you tackle him, you can kiss it goodbye. He had the speed. He was one of the fastest. He ended up going to Southern Wayne, and he was a track star. I mean, the guy could run, play baseball. I love Perry Eason and miss him so much. And then, of course, there's Blue Artists, who just recently passed last year. Thank God for Terrence Timothy, T Money, his son, who has been able to give me at least some contact with Blue, from beyond, because T Money, just like his daddy, Blue. And then, of course, there's Marty. There's Marty Artis. And I'm going to tell you something. My ass would have been kicked by a bunch of damn redneck, racist white boys more times than one if it wasn't for Marty Artis, Joey Kinlaw, and Johnny Holmes, and Mike Reed, and Lawrence, Steve Altman, and Tony Green, and James Davis, and all my brothers that had my back. I would have been beat up more times than once. And then there was, of course, Mike Reed. And how close me and Mike Reed became as male buddies can't be expressed in words. And Mike is no longer with us either. He died in a tragic car crash. But me and Mike, I'm talking 1977, 1978, 1979. We were talking about where the world was heading in terms of race relations and everything. And I'm not saying our mouth was a probe, but just about everything that me and Mike Reed talked about in our time together growing up has come into play. Bottom line, Rosewood shaped me as a social justice warrior, even though I wasn't aware of it. In 1968, I wasn't. I knew that I was different in some way. I didn't know how I was different, but I was. In Orangeburg, South Carolina, for example, residents protest segregation during a bowling alley protest at South Carolina State University, an all-black college in that state. 27 protesters are injured, including 3 fatalities. An investigation into force used by 9 officers ends in acquittals. So this history of police getting away with shit goes way back. 25 years after his original conviction for inciting the riot, a protest coordinator receives a pardon for the incitement to riot. And I want to make a pause right here. We had a guy who spent 20 years of his life for inciting a riot where there was death involved. Now, this was at a college, black college university. What have we got going on here in the present? We've got a group of people incited to riot by a former president of the United States. Okay? Why is not Donald Trump charged with incitement of a riot right fucking now? He's guilty of it. Or at least there's a case. There's enough evidence to bring a prosecutor to bring it to court. But once again, we're talking about the privilege of the oligarch plutocracy class of America. So, I'm not holding my breath. But we have been researching that issue very deeply here in the House of Public Discourse. Our admin, Christopher Witt Diamond, is maybe the authority on the Donald Trump corruption. And you should visit us at the House of Public Discourse Forum on Facebook if you haven't, because we have a lot of informative political advocates in our group who post a lot of wonderful, progressively biased news. I want to talk about biased news. All news has a bias. When you say your news is biased, well, guess what? I am. The House of Public Discourse News is progressively biased. And there's nothing wrong with being biased in your news coverage. What is key is that you back your bias up with factual reporting. Factual reporting, no matter the bias, is what's sorely lacking. What we have is biased news reporting with unsubstantiated and just flat out propaganda. And it was CBS News TV special by Walter Cronkite on his Vietnam tour that described the U.S. war effort as a stalemated and it really situates a lot of public skepticism about the war. And in my mind, now, guys, I want you to understand something. I'm not 60-year-old Johnny talking to you right now. I'm 7-year-old Johnny talking to you right now. And in my mind, at that time, the ongoing race riots were of more concern to me. Around February of 1968, I didn't know it was called the Turner Commission Report, but I remember Walter Cronkite reporting on it. Was published. Lyndon Johnson commissioned it to examine the causes of race riots in American cities over the years, and the report concludes that we are moving towards two separate and unequal societies. Now, how spot on was that document? We definitely live in two separate and unequal societies on many fronts. You got the oligarchs and us regular folks. You've got people living in the urban areas versus people living in the rural areas. You got two different ways of life there. You got two different mindsets. You got two different socializations and indoctrinations. And what has turned out to be the case is two separate and unequal societies. So it was a spot-on report. In my memory, this was a topic of conversation over a Sunday afternoon church meal. And that's why I decided to write about it. I remember a conversation after the Sunday church meal. That restaurant was over there at Wayne Memorial Hospital off Highway 70 West from the Goldsboro Rosewood area. And I'm going to tell you something. Those folks had the best damn flounder stuffed with crab meat ever. It was really a nice place to eat. It's where a lot of people went on Sundays after church. And my biggest strength is that I never forget anything, guys. And this can be both a positive and a negative for me. And it has been. You know, I remember some of my grandpa's friends, for example, who were church leaders to boot. I heard them saying, someone is going to grab that coon. According to the person leading the morning prayer that very Sunday, I remember, he was paid by the communists. And of course, my reference is to Dr. King, of course. Many of the high schools in the urban city schools had students walking out at the time. For example, the Los Angeles high school students walking out of classes to demand better education is just one example of it. But back in 1968, the demographic makeup of Rosewood School was about 80% white, 20% black. It may have even been more than that. To be honest, I am guesstimating there. I could be very liberal in my demographic there. It could have been even more than 80-20. So unlike some of the other schools in the county, like Southern Wayne, Eastern Wayne, Charles B. Aycock, Rosewood was still pretty much snowflake white, guys. I mean, it was snowflake white. I heard of some racial incidents stemming from those schools, but at Rosewood at the time, we had very little to any racial incidents until finally one night at a Rosewood basketball game, a black student cut the face of a white man And I know well, and I knew both of them well. And for the respect I have for both families, I will not mention their names. But paraphrasing, black man, white girl, find commonality and oneness. Community freaks out. Father catches case of the ass, confronts black boy, don't be fucking around with my daughter. Black man feels threatened and cuts the white man's face. I remember the hippies protest. Boy, do I remember the hippies protest. I was a hippie at heart, always, but I couldn't grow my hair long. I couldn't put bell-bottom jeans on. I couldn't wear a flowered shirt. I couldn't wear beads, or my dad would have beat the shit out of me. I remember the hippie protest. I was aware of the Black Panther movement. I was enormously affected by the Poor People's Campaign of Dr. King. I can remember with complete clarity the adults in the very conservative community of Rosewood that I grew up in making racial slurs and jokes about persons of color and Dr. King incessantly. There is nothing more soothing to the American senses than the smell in the morning of napalm was falling everywhere. We had napalm falling everywhere, guys, at this time. It is now March in the year of our Lord, 1968. Nixon wins the New Hampshire GOP primary with 78% of the vote. Senator Eugene McCarthy, Minnesota's anti-war candidate, takes 42% of the Democratic voters. And I remember this like it was yesterday. Here comes Robert F. Kennedy, entering the Democratic presidential nomination, saying that McCarthy's New Hampshire showing proves how deep are the divisions within our party and country. It is now unmistakably clear that we can only change these disastrous policies by changing the people who make them. Now, we have a mantra, a couple of main mantras in the House Public Discourse Forum advocacy group. One of those is history does repeat itself in politics. So I want to read that last sentence again. It is now unmistakably clear that we can only change these disastrous policies by changing the people who make them. And that is exactly what we got to do in the present. In this current time, 222 is coming up. We've got motherfuckers storming the White House. We got redneck, racist, white privileged groups, we got these Proud Boys, and all these groups are emboldened to go play army, to take their playing army in the woods and bring it up close to us people. We saw what happened during the Black Lives Matter protest. The Hill House, considered anything the Kennedy's name with a Kennedy name to be trash. Nothing that a Kennedy said or did or would do, according to I remember my mom especially, she was a definite Kennedy hater. Across the country, there are hundreds of protests going on. And I was getting ready for the upcoming termite baseball season in Rosewood. When I was a child, tryouts were around the corner. I remember that very much. And it remains in my memory. The smell of, the honeysuckle and Mr. Henry's Pig Lagoon when I came home one late March spring afternoon from termite baseball practice. And during dinner, mom and my dad were discussing the news that Lyndon B. Johnson, who had won 61% of the popular vote to Barry Goldwater's 39% in 1964, is not seeking re-election. Okay. There were a lot of people burning draft cards at that time. And my grandpa used to call them, I'll never get it, and it's the tone, folks. You know, it wasn't them goddamn hippies. It was them goddamn hippie freaks. My Uncle Steve was one of those hippie freaks that could not be seen by the naked eye because he was in the same situation I was. He'd got his ass beat too. My grandpa would have killed him. And then it happened. It happened over, if you're from Goldsboro, Wayne County, over by Perk Hill Estates now. At the time, it wasn't Perk Hill Estates. It was a little two-lane, it was a little one-lane dirt path back into about 10 acres of woods that was owned by my family, my grandfather. But it was turned into, by my grandfather and father, into a subdivision now called Perk Hill Estates. At the time, it was just a two-lane dirt road that led deep into the woods that would be my grandpa Perkins' house. During that time, my dad, John Hill, was building our first house right next door, so we were living with Grandma Dot and Grandma Perkins, okay? And all of a sudden, in a television news broadcast featuring, once again, Walter Cronkite, he reported that Martin Luther King Jr., who was in Memphis for the sanitation workers' strike, was fatally shot on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel. And the white supremacist James Earl Ray is fleeing and is still at large at the time. And I'll never forget it. And, you know, I'll go on a lie detector test, folks. I am not hyperverbally here. I'm trying to be as honest as I can be. And that's why, even though my teeth are all fucked up from my cancer, treatments, and I haven't been able to get my teeth fixed yet because I can't afford it. It's been a big step for me to get in front of this camera with my fucked up teeth. I'm going to tell you that. It's not been easy for me to do that. And I just made a decision that, hey, my tribe are not the kind of people that really would hold prejudices against me. But you got to understand something. When you're from the South and you have a slow Southern drawl anyway, and your fucking teeth are fucked up, you're going to hear some shit. And I'm sure there's probably people talking shit about me right now, but look at them fucked up teeth. What the hell does he know? He can't even keep his teeth fixed. But I had to take some serious ass fucking medicine, and it caused my teeth, bottom teeth, to fall out. But anyway, the shock hit me hard, guys. I am glad. And then all of a sudden, I hear from my grandpa, "I'm glad someone shot that nigger." I remember the general joke of the adults to be one of celebration, and to see that nigger had that coming type of joy. That nigger had it coming. I'm glad someone shot his ass. That's what I heard as a child, 7-year-old. This movement left a deep impression on me. I experienced my first real trauma when Dr. King was assassinated. As a child, I used to build tree houses and forts all over my grandfather's forest. I was your modern day fucking Davy Crockett, Daniel Boone. Okay. I had rabbit boxes all over the damn place. I was there. I cried. I went to one of my favorite spots in the woods, and I cried as a 7-year-old. Yeah, because and the reason I went into the woods to cry is because I didn't want my grandpa, ma, and dad to see me weeping. I could hear my grandpa, "What you crying for that nigger, over that nigger for?" Or my mom, or my dad. That could have been something out of their mouths. And I can tell you without any hesitation, I've heard similar stuff all throughout my entire childhood and adult life. There was always a flashpoint issue with my family. I remember one of those being the burning of the draft cards. I mean, if you burned your draft card, I mean, you should be lined up and fucking shot. Robert F. Kennedy is shot a few months after King was assassinated. If you guys notice me leaning down when I set up, I wanted to get out of the fucking bed. I'm going to get one of those green screens eventually. Well, actually, I've already got it ordered. It's just got to get here, and then we can be more professional. But I have to lean forward because when I set up like this, I start getting real bad lower back pain. So please forgive me if you see me hunkering down. It's just to relieve some pressure off my back. But Robert F. Kennedy is shot a few months after King was assassinated. He was gaining momentum in his presidential campaign. He wins the California primary, and he's shot and killed at the Ambassador Hotel. The gunman, Sirhan, is captured by police. He is a Jordanian of Palestinian descent. He's now 73 and serving life in prison, and he was just recently up for parole. I don't think he got that. The thing that sticks out here for me is all those shot, Dr. King, Robert Kennedy, John F. Kennedy. I'm not sure Malcolm X at this time has been shot, but I know some of your more prevalent black activists had been killed. And please forgive me for my unprofessionalism in not being able to call those names. But I remember all of those people that were getting shot at the time, and including my family and many people in the Rosewood neighborhood viewed those people negatively. But for the most part, Rosewood remained isolated from serious events in 1968. Excuse me. And really is still isolated in many ways to this very day. The Poor People's Campaign continued to work, though. We were in the midst of the Cold War at the time. Johnson signs the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons Treaty, which remains to this day the world's primary tool for stopping the spread of nuclear weapons to non-nuclear states and, reducing the number of nuclear weapons in the world. So there was a lot of provocative stuff going on in 1968. It's why I decided to start my book, my story of growing up Rosewood, in this year. It was a very pivotal year for our nation. And historically, a lot of the things that happened in that time frame have come to fruition here in the present America. In the coming years, technology and computers will play an increasingly significant role in our lives. And Rosewood just simply isn't that place. Or it wasn't it. I lived in Rosewood from the time I was born, minus 2 years living in Chapel Hill, until 1995. I moved out of Rosewood, and then I happened to live with my mom and father some when I was helping my dad with his business in Duplin County, North Carolina, and I left the state in 2007. But one reason I used to tell my dad, we your business, we need to come up to speed with. Fuck them goddamn computers. Who needs a fucking computer? Well, your ass is out of business. One reason right now, motherfucker, because he listened to me. But you're the dad and I'm the son, and the son don't know shit. So sit down and shut the fuck up. Okay. We are now in June. It is the tobacco barning season. Well, let me restate that. I misspoke. We are now in June. It is the barning season for tobacco. It is common to see fields of tobacco in eastern North Carolina. Rosewood is no different. Among the Rosewood community cash crops is tobacco. Well, it is the cash crop. I don't know if the pig, chicken, and turkey production has overtaken tobacco, but tobacco has always been the main cash crop. Tobacco farmers are some of the most prominent Rosewood residents. Pork, chicken, and turkey production has also increased over time. As white folks fled urban centers, we know it as white flight, they ran a significant amount, to Rosewood. We had an excellent school, even though I don't know what it was ranked. I don't know what it is now, but a lot of my teachers ended up not liking me. They called me an underachiever. Come to find out, a lot of the teachers at Rosewood were racist. They were some of the biggest mouthpieces for that Johnny Hill, that black bear. How could he be that? I used to hear it all, guys. Oh no. You can say, you need to get over it. You need to get over it. No. I would get over it if y'all would have got over it. Y'all haven't got over it. Y'all still some racist motherfuckers. And it's gotten worse. And I'm not going to get over it. Matter of fact, I'm going to do everything I can to stop it. And that was one of the reasons I started the House of Public Discourse, is that I was going to call out racism, and the systematic racism issues wherever and whenever I could. And you know what? Growing up Rosewood is very much about that very thing. White folks fled urban areas and ran to Rosewood. It had an excellent school. There aren't too many black kids. Churches of quality. And when I say good quality, I'm not going to bash the churches in the community. But there was some fake dogma. I've learned that from my adult study. I studied Bible scripture for 6 years straight, every verse, every commentary. And I came away with the realization that what evangelicalism and what's been preached down there in the little church in the Dale is whack. Sports teams were present in the Rosewood community. And when I say sports teams, now in 1968, we did not have a football team yet at Rosewood. My first season participating in any sport for the Rosewood community as a boy, and I had Mr. C.B. Mitchell as my coach. Now, C.B. Mitchell was Andy and Burl's daddy. And, I know Mr. C.B., he was probably disappointed in me for making some mistakes as a young man and as an adult. But I'm going to tell you, Mr. C.B. Mitchell was the scout leader of the Troop 258. He was, like my father, a community father. And I love Mr. C.B. Mitchell. And, he was a good man. But I had Mr. C.B. Mitchell as my coach, and he was the leader of Scout Troop. And he was probably the finest man I ever knew. He was, once again, Burl and Andy's dad. He was just one of those community fathers. And this was termite ball. This is pre-Little League. We kids in Rosewood, we had it made in shade, man. Rosewood kids had it made into shade, and we didn't even realize it. But with this false sense of security comes underlying issues that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I was just not aware of them yet. Okay? I wasn't aware. My dad was an apparel rep for Golden Thief shirts. We were living with my grandpa and my grandma Perkins. The place is now Perk Hill Subdivision. I had a go-kart, a huge pond in the backyard full of fish. Man, I had everything a little boy could ever wish for, folks. I did. I had everything a little boy could ever wish for. I had a pond full of bass. I could jump in and go swimming. I had woods to play in with a creek running through it. I had it made as a kid as far as that type of thing's going on. But there was my mom. And you say, oh, here goes John, bang, bang, mom. When you don't have a loving relationship with your mom, who's supposed to be your most ardent supporter, it fucks with you. It did me. I don't know about you, but it fucked with me. And it's still, I put it on, to be honest with you, it don't fuck with me anymore. But one thing I'm doing is writing this book to help me therapeutically deal with the fact that I had a mom. I'm damn near laying on my deathbed in Macomb County Hospital here from lacidosis something other from my kidney failure, full of toxins, can hardly fucking breathe. I got the energy, got my mom on the phone because my wife gave her the number. She calls me up on the phone. I say, Mom, I forgive you for all those years of you being how you were. I don't need to be forgiven. Well, bitch, you need to go reevaluate yourself somewhere. But that was my mom. I will not blame any problems I've ever had on my mom, but let's just say, she's a piece of work, y'all. She's a piece of work. From my earliest cognitive memories, it is of her and her tone and that face. I did not realize it at the time, but she was raised by Oscar Stanton, the grandpa. And like much, I have learned she was guilty of faulty upbringing in her own right. I remember things like, why, I remember, like I say, everything. And it is a curse sometimes, folks. I remember things like, why they got to put a nigger in every commercial nowadays? My grandpa would say. I can still hear my mom reply, that damn affirmative action. Excuse me. Shout outs, y'all. Shootouts were going on across the nation between police and black militants. The police were the cowboys and the blacks were the Indians. You could tell in the Rosewood community that overall favor was for the police and continued segregation. It was August of 1968 that the name Richard Milhouse Nixon came into my life. The Republican National Convention formally nominates Tricky Dick for president. The adults in my family were like, happy, South's going to rise again. I remember my mom and dad talking about how Nixon was going to stop them liberal commies. I remember her saying something to the effect, them niggers can kiss them food stamps. Bye. Now, I do know this. They felt some sense of victory. And I was a small child. I saw nothing wrong with it at the time. I thought my parents, were just like everybody else's parents, even though I didn't agree with them at all. Then, but then I would see stories, and let me start over here again. But then I would see stories on the news and hear things from local black radios station like Private First Class James Anderson Jr., who died covering, he's a black man, died covering an enemy grenade to protect fellow Marines during a firefight in Vietnam, becomes the first American Marine to receive the Medal of Honor. I saw a different view of blacks than my family at this yet young age, but it is not clear to me at this point. It should have been clear to me at that point. But once again, the actions, the racial slurs, the rudeness, the meanness was something that confused me as a child, very much so. I don't know, maybe something's wrong with Johnny for that confusing me, but I don't think so. It was not until later that month at the Democratic National Convention being held in Chicago did, for the first time, I come to understand at the age of 7, I did not think like the rest of my family. I know that might seem weird to you guys, but at the Democratic National Convention, police and the Illinois National Guard go on a rampage, clubbing and tear gassing hundreds of anti-war demonstrators, news reporters, and bystanders, with much of the violence being broadcast on national TV. And I remember seeing it. I remember it scaring the living fuck out of me, watching those cops hit those protesters. Excuse me, guys. Well, hell, what are a hippie? I'm proud to be a damn hippie. But I remember it causing me to have nightmares, seeing that, those cops with those helmets on, white helmets and blue shirts, beating the hell out of those people. The next day, Vice President Hubert Humphrey, perceived as the heir to Johnson war policies, Hubert Humphrey, you remember him, wins the Democratic nomination, mostly through delegates controlled by party bosses. Now, there's another example of history repeating itself. Hubert Humphrey was placed into office through delegates controlled by party bosses. How in the hell did Hillary Clinton beat Bernie Sanders in 2016? It's because delegates controlled by party bosses and the DNC. History repeats itself in politics. Remember, nothing is more important to me than sports at the time. I am that kid who had every baseball card, every basketball card, every football card. I watched every college football game. I watched every NFL game. I watched every NBA game and college game I could. And I even at that time watched every baseball game that was on TV. And with all this racial bigotry going on in my life in 1968, I remember Arthur Ashe, black man, wins the U.S. Open, becoming the first black man to win a Grand Slam tennis tournament in damn near an all-white sport. Okay? The Apollo 7 mission, which spends more time in space than all the Soviet flights to that time combined, makes the first live TV broadcast from up there. I remember us sitting around as a family in awe of it, of what man could do. And then came one of the most memorable moments of my young childhood growing up in Rosewood. Like I told you, I'm into sports. And at the Olympic Games in Mexico City, Americans Tommy Smith and John Carlos received the gold medal, bronze medal, and the 200-meter dash, then raised their gloved fists during the national anthem to protest violence and poverty among African Americans. The next day, the International Olympic Committee strips the medals and sends them home. This made no sense to me as a kid. Okay, as a kid, this made no sense to me. I remember my grandfather and some of his buddies over playing, they were playing the game of bridge. Excuse me, guys. And I remember Mr. Russell. I'm not going to use his last name, but I remember Mr. Russell saying, they should not let them niggers on the team if they don't know how to act. Mr. Charlie, who was, he was a cornerstone of the Pine Forest Methodist Church. Mr. Charlie, what is the world coming to? Damn niggers want to take over. My grandpa chimes in. See, I do not forget these conversations. At the time, they were troubling and confusing to me. They really were. And I'm not overstating that, and I'm not being hyperbolic here. I'm trying to convey with you, my audience, that I'm writing this book, Growing Up Rosewood, for a reason. Growing up there had a profound effect on me and who I am today. And everybody might be thinking, I hate Rosewood. I don't hate Rosewood. I love Rosewood. I love Rosewood. I love being a Rosewood Eagle. I take pride in the fact that I still hold the school record for 6 touchdowns against the number 2 team in the state. The Eagles pumped that ass, beat that ass 66-6, and still proud of it. But I'm not proud of the behavior and mindset of racism, systematic racism, that has kept your area of the state in a complete squalor. And you can say, no, it ain't. No, it ain't. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Compared to other areas of the country, you're living in one shithole of the country. There's no other. You can soft shell it, put word salad on it, put some special dressing on it. But the bottom line is you're living in a shithole, economic shithole, an economic shithole. There's about as much opportunity in Goldsboro for a person living in Goldsboro, especially if you don't have a college education, as I fart in a Chinese whirlwind. Nixon wins the election. George Wallace, who my grandfather, he was a Wallace man, George Wallace, segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. That's George Wallace. George Wallace, the racist from Alabama, wins 5 southern states. My grandpa Perkins was a Wallace man. However, blacks were making some incremental progress on the political front. I don't know how many of y'all remember this lady, but I'm going to tell you something. I loved her. I loved Shirley Chisholm. Shirley Chisholm, I used to remember, there's a black woman running against all them white dudes. I know she's got some balls somewhere that we don't know about. She was smart, intelligent, courageous, and trend-setting individual was Shirley Chisholm of New York. And she becomes the first black woman elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. She ended up running for president Okay. And, she stood about a snowball chance in hell of winning, but she had the courage to do so. And which is why it's that kind of spirit that no matter if it was going to be, an unsuccessful attempt, she made the attempt. And I can write this book about how my hometown, where I was born and raised, is suffering and largely suffering because of the pains of racism. And it might go in this fucking ear and right out the other and not do any good at all. But at least when they put me 6 foot under, I can at least have a lasting legacy that, hey, first of all, this book will be in the Library of Congress. I do know that when it's published. And that at least, he attempted to change the course. That's all we can do, folks, as political advocates, is try to educate and inform with good information, not disinformation. We saw some progress in human rights equality in 1968. Yale University, after 267 years, decides to admit female undergraduates, for example. Back home on the Bible Belt front, the Supreme Court unanimously rules that an Arkansas law prohibiting the teaching of evolution in public school violates the First Amendment. Also, my real first hero sports figure in my life was O.J. Simpson. I mean, I'm guilty. I was an O.J. Simpson fan on the football field, okay? And I thought he was, and to this day, I still think he's one of the most elusive, best running backs there ever was. I wanted to run the ball like Juice, okay? I wanted to be Juice on the football field. There was a guy at my high school who is a role model, and I looked up to. His name was James Tiny Reed. I think still to this day, he's probably the best running back in the history of Rosewood High School. I never saw Quentin play the Q. I heard he was really good. I knew there's been some other guys too, and I don't know under Coach Britt. I'm sure Coach Britt's had, he's done such a fantastic job at Rosewood with the program. I'm sure there's probably, maybe some better, but Tiny Reed, he had the number 32, and I swear he was Rosewood's version of O.J. Simpson of USC. He wins the Heisman Trophy. It's the same trophy that in 1999 he auctioned off for $255,000 to go towards his $33.5 million civil judgment against him in the killing of his ex-wife and her lover. But, and I got some but here, but it is in the beginning of my 3rd grade year at Rosewood that I encountered my first run-in with racism in my life. Me, Johnny, this guy in front of you right now, sitting in in my little chair here in front of you. It was my very first run-in with racism. It was about the time that the state of North Carolina was finally starting to integrate our public schools. I was a 3rd grader, and all of us white kids were sitting on one side of the room in those, double-seated school desks. The other side of the room was empty. We were waiting on the black kids to be brought from the Barnes Chapel school about a mile down the road and not too far from where my home was located. When the black kids folks arrived, you could feel the tension among us, okay? This is the first time in my life, it was the first time in many of my peers' life, both white and black, that we were in a confined space together. Well, as those students took their seats, one kid, his name was Ricky Wooten. And let me tell you something, Ricky is no longer with us. Him and his brother, Eugene, both have passed. And they ended up moving to Southern Wayne, but at the time they were going to Rosewood. And Ricky was skinny as a rail, okay? And I can still see the look of just total fear on his face. He got stuck with no chair to sit in or on or just sit in. And it just so happened that yours truly was sitting right up front in a double desk. I had an empty chair in my desk. So my teacher at the time, Miss Fritz, instructed Ricky to sit next to me. So the very first school day, the very first day of segregation in North Carolina school system in Wayne County, they were running behind. They finally integrated schools. But the very first day, I'm sitting right next to a black kid in a desk, only separated by a piece of wood. Okay. Folks, the room looked like a fucking yin yang symbol. I mean, whites on one side, blacks on the other. And it was at recess time that I got my first full dose of what white racism looks, sounds, and more importantly feels like. I heard, Johnny touched a nigger, Johnny touched a nigger, Johnny's got the cooties, Johnny's got the cooties, Johnny touched a nigger, Johnny got the cooties. I heard it from my kids at the recess. I mean, white kids were laughing and making fun of me, and it made me cry, okay? It made me cry. Even at that age, my mind wondered, where did these kids learn this behavior from? And I'll go, oh, I reconciled it to myself. It was their parents. Why? Because I had heard the same language myself from my parents and grandfather. Okay? The same shit coming out in children's mouth, I had heard coming out the adult's mouth. Okay? Not just my family, not singling them out, but they were specific to me. They were my family. So we are orbiting around the moon in Apollo 8, but still treating the poor and minorities in this country like they're second-rate citizens. It's just a sign of the times. We are in a new year. It's 1969 now. Nixon has escalated the war in Asia. Civil unrest is still an understatement. I have just come off a year when a man I looked up to was shot down. I've been ridiculed by my peers over race. I got a living situation where my family was at each other's throats. Man, let me tell you, some of those early morning debates with my mom getting me out of bed, jerking the covers off me, and, hey, son, it's time to go to school. Yeah, it's time to go to school. All kinds of stuff like that. They're legendary because you got to understand something about me. I might have a lot of flaws, and this may be one of them, but I just don't do well with authority, guys. And one reason is I've had what was supposed to be the authority figure in my life, the person who's supposed to love me, the person who is my strongest ally, is the person in my life, even at this age, that I want to stay the fuck away from because she just destroyed my self-esteem. And I want to apologize to some of my Rosewood peers now. If I was cocky, rude, or overly aggressive, it was because I was overcompensating for being told what a piece of shit I was by my own mom. Okay, so I want you guys to forgive me if I was a bit of an aggressive person, because that's not who I am. Then the second most traumatic thing that happened in my life occurred. 4 students are killed by the Ohio National Guard at Kent State University in an anti-war protest. I mean, state police had also killed 2 black students around that same time at Jackson State College in Mississippi. And all you could hear around Rosewood community was, those damn hippie nigger-loving freaks got what the heck, Carmen. I heard this from kids to the people leading the prayers on fucking Sunday. Okay? I heard that. Okay? I heard it more than once from more than one source. Nixon did some good things as a president. He set up the EPA. He made it legal for 18 years old to vote. And of course, Nixon opened up China. Nixon was God around the Hill House. He was the precursor to Reagan. You know, it was Nixon was the man, the authoritarian figure until Reagan, and then it came Reagan. Then I remember it like it was yesterday. The damn Pentagon Papers came out. Y'all remember that? The Pentagon, Ellsberg, Daniel Ellsberg. My dad, and I'm most proud of this, okay? I am very proud of this. I'm going to tell you right now, the reason my dad started football in the Rosewood community was because of me. And I want to tell you that story. I didn't write it down. But one day in class, me, Andy Mitchell, Gary Bass, Chris Thompson, Brett Thompson, who went to our church, and Chris, and there was some other people. We wanted to play some football. So I thought we were all going to get together and play football. And I told my dad, and my dad wanted me to play football, guys. He was all about sports. So I don't know if y'all remember, there was a Mason's there on William Street in Goldsboro, old Mason's department store. I'll never forget it. My dad went in there and bought me a football helmet with that plastic styrofoam in it and those damn thigh pads that were harder than a brick piece of plastic shit. And I went to go play football with all my friends, and no one showed up. And I was there by myself. I was distraught. I was like, damn, I thought we were going to do this. So my dad, John Hill, started Little League Pop Warner football in the Rosewood community. And many of us who made up the earliest Rosewood High School football teams played on that team. And I'm proud of that. We played against Love Memorial Church. We played against the Boys Club. However, it was my love for music that would take center stage in 1969. For me, it also became the year I identified with the hippies. I had not started smoking weed yet. Not quite. Music wasn't solely art. In 1969, it became a platform to send a message. We saw the Denver Pop Festival open up on June 27th with 50,000 people in attendance. Shortly after the Woodstock Music and Art Fair, the famous Woodstock, were in full force on the 15th of August with some over 400,000 attendees. People were gathering to hear the voices of their generation, those like themselves, ordinary, but with the belief that there was more to the world than the chaos that was going on around them. That's what Woodstock was all about. Chaos ensued there. We had 2 concert goers die, one from heroin overdose, the other from a bursted appendix, of all god-awful things. Other famous events in 1969 were to follow. The New York Stonewall Inn, an underground gay bar, was raided by police. It was a place for the marginalized of the gay community to gather. Growing up in Rosewood, we did not see much of this violence. In many ways, we were sheltered from it. I'm not sure that was a good thing, but at the time it seemed to be. I will never forget the third most traumatic thing in my early years, the Manson murders. Could the adults be right? Excuse me. Are all these hippies like Charles Manson? What happened in 1969? Social and political movements were exploding at every corner. The civil rights movement, the emerging counterculture of the 1960s, and the anti-Vietnam War movement. One of the single most shocking events was the murder of Sharon Tate and 4 other victims in her Los Angeles home at the hands of the cult leader Charles Manson and that group of killers that he had surrounded himself with. These murders were verification to my family and others I heard in the community that forces of the devil were on the side of the hippies and God loves us, racist, God-fearing white folks. That's what I heard. And you can't tell me what I didn't hear. I know what I heard. And like I said, I'm more than willing to get on a lie detector test any day of the week and 5 times on fucking Sunday. Back then, airplanes were being hijacked daily. Pollution was so out of control. For instance, there was a river in, I can't pronounce the name of that river. It's a very hard pronunciation. In Cleveland, Ohio, and the damn river catches fire due to pollution levels in the water. And this wasn't an uncommon thing. This was just that. This was not uncommon. It was around this time that the troops were starting to come home from the war. And less than a month after President Nixon implements the removal of U.S. troops in Vietnam, the first U.S. troops leave South Vietnam in Saigon. The new left and extremist movements from the FBI surfaced, revealing Reagan's plan to disrupt the distribution of California's campuses through, the new left and extremist movements from the FBI service, revealing Reagan's plan. He was the governor of California at the time, to disrupt the disruption of California's campuses through psychological warfare. Now, that was in my research, and I don't know what tactics were used, but it constituted the term and the labeling of psychological warfare. And then there was my mom again. Mom. We called her the Betsy. My daddy called her the Butterball. Every day calling Senator Edward Ted Kennedy a murderer. The Kennedy boys were always getting in trouble, it seems. In Chappaquiddick, a car driven by Senator Edward Kennedy plunges off a bridge, leading to the death of a passenger, Mary Jo Kopechne. And Kennedy survives, but Mary Jo does not. This just added to the case that liberals were bad, and look at our Nixon. All the white Neil Armstrong, excuse me, I'm moving too fast here. All the while, Neil Armstrong is walking on the moon. Then around August of 1969, it came over the news about the Manson murders. The whole nation, no matter your race, was shocked over this. I remember being scared to death, but feeling safe as I lived in isolated backwoods Rosewood. They're not going to come here and get my ass. It was not much longer before that was shattered when a classmate of mine, his name was Philip, mom blew his head off. There goes the neighborhood. Thank God for Woodstock in New York. The Woodstock Music and Art Fair opened up with over 400,000 young people in attendance. We had all kinds of great legendary performers. that performed there. But America is drenched in racial unrest and disputes between classes. Activism breaks loose as race riots are every day. No face means more to me at this time than John Lennon. I love John Lennon. In a lot of ways, I am who I am, trying to carry on the example of John Lennon. And I know I'm doing a lousy job of it, but, known for their anti-war protests, the trial of the Chicago 8 begins. That was a recent documentary on Netflix about the Chicago 8. It was a wonderful, outstanding program produced by Netflix. And I highly suggest, if you haven't seen it, you take a look at it. It's very informative. America is awash in the division of rural living and urban living to this very day. Hey, the way I looked at it, I was 8 years old now. If the Mets can win the series, anything can happen. Hell, we got color TV now. We got color TV now. Hell, the world's got to be, something's got to be moving in the right direction here. We got color TV. I want my MTV. You know what I'm saying? But the assaults on blacks are still raging. Fred Hampton, that's the name. That's the name of the guy shot that I was thinking of. Fred Hampton and Mark Clark, two members of the Black Panther Party, are murdered by Chicago police in an attempt in an apartment, on West Side of Chicago. Over two separate locations, Los Angeles police make surprise attacks on Black Panthers. Party members and children are arrested by some 400 police officers. A shootout involving Roland Freeman leaves him with mass bullet wounds. He survives. All of that in my life. I was more interested in Michael Jackson making his first appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show. Do y'all remember that? With the brothers and sisters, Jackson 5. He rocked in the treetops all day long, rocking in the drum and singing that song. Every bird is on Chamber Street, walking. I can't remember the words, but they sang the song Rockin' Robin. Rockin' Robin, yeah, 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 Rockin' Robin, yeah. I was into that. So, all of these acts of violence were just newsflash to us here in Rosewood. That type of stuff is not going on here, in Rosewood. We were rocking to the beat of the Rockin' Robins, but, that wasn't reality, folks. It was not reality. And but there was one thing clear to me, even as a child. It was a lucky break for me. The area was poor, as you can see. It didn't happen to my family. However, for others in the community and the area, this was not true. Poverty was widespread, even in Wayne County, Galesboro, at this time. The year is early 1970, and even in my youth, I was fully aware of poverty. I was an ardent student of Dr. King, although I was not aware of it at the time. His poor people's movement would have an effect, has affected me to the point I am an advocate to this very day. I am sitting before you today as a self-described independent, progressive, democratic, socialist, social warrior because of the poor people's movement by Dr. Martin Luther King that I was influenced by as a small child. That's why I'm here before you today. That's what precipitated my thinking, okay, Johnny, you can't have a boss. You're just not that guy. What are you going to do? And what you're seeing is the results of what I did. What I was not aware of until I researched an article I was publishing in the concentration of poverty in Wayne County region. I mean, remembering Rosewood is a white flight community. Unless you have a loved one who is starving, not until you have a homeless person in your family do people pay attention to the plight of their neighbors. Even more so when they are of a different race or social standing. In our country, poverty is criminalized. The issues of the poor in this country are swept under the rug. On the right, we have this, I got mine, go fend for your fucking self attitude. Things are no different in the Rosewood community. When it comes to the issues of poverty and stereotypes are boundless. But what sticks out about growing up Rosewood is that this poverty is not evenly distributed. Let me restate that. Growing up Rosewood is one of the main things that sticks out about growing up Rosewood is that its poverty is not evenly distributed. In Wayne County, poor people tend to live in areas with disproportionately high levels of poverty rather than near the wealthy neighborhoods. In Wayne County, there are about 10 major public housing developments. Poor people living there are separated and segregated. It has always been this way. Disconnection has resulted. Crime has no option but to rise. The lack of opportunity and education keeps people stuck, unable to escape from their circumstances. There are stories of success, but they are rare, and reason why they're so extraordinary. Due to lack of real education, they can't escape the poverty-causing housing circumstances and despair by getting a job that will pay them enough to leave. Goldsboro crime rate is the highest in these communities and is to this day abominable. Goldsboro's crime rate is abominable. Teenage pregnancy is common. Violence abuse, child abuse are common. After seeing that happen for 4 and 5 generations, you begin to think it impossible, folks. I've seen this attitude. I've experienced this attitude from people, but it's not. However, most people find it easier to sit back in their comfortable seats and blame the poor in Goldsboro for their plight. It's all them goddamn niggers over there on welfare. That's why we suck. Them damn niggers and them damn people don't want to work. These issues were raging in Goldsboro, and with this came the white flight to Rosewood. I want to thank you, folks. That's going to be the completion of my chapter 3, the early years. Our next broadcast, we're going to pick up on the middle years. I want to thank you all for listening to and being with me here in the Progressive Talk Zone with your host, Johnny Hill. We're streaming live from the Motown Get Down inside the House of Public Discourse Forum on the all-new House of Public Discourse Radio.com to your Facebook page.